Hey, everybody. On the Road with Beards and Dunn is back for another episode. Hey, Beards, how's your day going?
Done good. I had a guide trip this morning, went out and caught a bunch of crappies, and then I just I came home, cleaned the fish for him, and then took him back to where he's an anesthesiologist from Alabama. And
Wow, cool.
he works up here at the Bemidji Hospital. He's 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. We call him Rent-A-Docs up here. Nicest guy, but I'm telling you, Don, I had to listen close when he talked to me because he had such a southern drawl that you could not believe it. So, and we caught some walleyes, which they don't have down there, and northern pike. And yeah, we had a really good time. And so, yeah, good to be back again.
So is the fishing season's full blast, and are you keeping busy?
Oh, I am. So June starts in 2 days on June 1st, and I have no openings left in June, and my July is filling up. But I was just doing a fishing podcast with Paul Bunyan, Fishing Paul Bunyan Country, earlier this afternoon, and because Kev Jackson asked me the same thing, I said, hey, even though I'm completely booked for June, give me a call if you're coming to the Bemidji area, because every once in a while you get a cancellation. And if I can't take you out, I can put you on to another guide that'll take you out and have a good time.
This is going to sound like a wacky question for you, Beards. Is there such a thing as night fishing?
There is. In fact, a lot of people, especially out here on Lake Bemidji, right out my back door, they'll start going out right before it gets dark, and they troll these shallow running rapalas over the top of these weed flats and in shallow water, 7-8 foot of water. The walleyes will move up there and start feeding after dark, and they catch a lot of them. But Don, I get up at 2:45 every morning. I don't do any night fishing no more. I'm usually in bed by 8 o'clock.
I was going to say night fishing would be you could get up and go night fishing. that's what you get up in the middle of the night.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's cool. I guess I didn't. I'm thinking I didn't know if it was even legal. And
no, a lot of folks do that, and but no,
hunting is illegal with lights, because the deer and stuff will freeze in a headlight and you blast them.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be fair. All right.
No, but
that's cool.
You can fish all night long if you want to.
All right. Hey, let's think about, man, I don't know about you, Dick, but last week's guest with Rod Dixon for me was so much fun. I could have spoken to that guy for hours. And
I know.
Can we share? He sent us a text as soon as we hung up, and he said he had a great time. And he said, I love what he said. He goes, but Beards and Dunn, I could have done that for 3 days.
I know.
That is so cool. And I think he is a great personality.
Dunn, he's such a nice guy, and what a talent. And I could listen to that New Zealand accent all day long.
I know. It's just one of those, my daughter-in-law, Stephanie, is from London, England.
Yeah.
And I spent a week with them. Karen was down at Beach Week a week or so ago, and I spent a week with Ben and Stephanie at their apartment. And she is so much fun to chit chat with. I just love her English accent, and I know we kind of tease her about it because she'll say, she'll say words that we go, well, how do you say? I always pick on her. Instead of saying water, she'll say water.
Yeah. Oh
yeah. They don't use all the letters. They just use a few. But anyway, and it's so cute. But it's kind of like Australia, New Zealand, England.
Right.
They kind of are fun to listen to. And so, Rod Dixon was that's a highlight for me. I mean,
done.
I think this podcast for me has been just such a treat because, a lot of these guys, I've followed their careers. I didn't know them. You got to get to know them because you kind of hung out in that.
Sure.
Let's just be honest, in that circle, in that atmosphere of, elite runners. And you guys runners are pretty personable typically. I don't know if there's anybody, Salazar always came across as maybe a little more reserved and quiet. I don't know. That's that New England, might have been his New England upbringing or Cuban, just his culture. But, most guys, they're like you and me. They kind of love to visit and chit chat. They give you the shirt off your back once you get to know them, they know you're not trying to get anything out of them. They'll do anything for you.
Well, and Dunn, most of our interviews we've had are with guys and gals that are way 40 years past their prime. But it's like me. I love just reminiscing. It brings back
Oh,
such good memories.
it does, and you're only as old as you feel. And I feel like,
Yes.
sometimes I forget. Every now and then I have a dream where I can run, and you wake
Right.
up and you go, man, that was so cool. And then it's kind of like, but life goes on, and it kind of is what we were going to talk about a little about, transitioning, and
Yes.
I've had several people ask me about, like, do you still run? And I'm pretty, I might up front and say, nah, I can't run anymore. I've
Right.
heard several elite runners kind of same thing, well, my running career's over. And some of them still run for fitness and for pleasure. And you do. I
That's
mean,
kind of me. Yeah.
I think we'll have to take your heart out and beat it with a stick someday. If your brain ever goes out on you, your heart will
Right.
never stop. But a lot of them, they just and it's typically an injury, a chronic.
Yes.
In my case, it was my left knee. I've had 4 surgeries on it, and in 1990, I started running in 71. So we're going to talk about cycling a little bit and kind of what
Yes.
I've been doing for enjoyment and for fitness. But from 1971 to 1991, Beards, as you're probably well aware, I was hooked on running.
Oh, okay. Listeners, listen. There, Mikey Dunn I'd never met anybody, and we've been, friends since 1978. Great friends, best friends. And that was so into running, had, I think, every issue of Runner's World magazine and a bunch of the others. And, oh, yeah. But then, done. But then with your injuries, you transitioned and you came as passionate for cycling as you did for running, maybe even a little bit more.
I did. So after a 20-year running career, and it was pretty much the only time I didn't run was if I was sick or injured. There was never like, I'm just going to take a few weeks off and kick back and enjoy life. And that never crossed my mind. It was always preparing. I always had a goal and a passion to go, to try to do something and for personal satisfaction. But when 91 came and my knee got to the point where I couldn't run without so much pain, I quit, and I took about 3 or 4 weeks, and I've always gave Kerry Gress in Dickinson, North Dakota, a shout out because he was a friend of mine, and he's a former Marine. I mean, I just always say the guy's the nicest guy in the world, but he was a badass. I mean, the guy was tough as nails. He was a bull rider. He grew up on a farm, ranch up in North Dakota. It was a bull. I mean, just the nicest guy. You'd want him on your. If you ever got into a scrap and Kerry was on your side, you'd be okay. He'd be fine. Well, I was running with him before my injury took me out of running because he was into triathlons. And you probably have heard this, but, I kind of fell off the map for about 3 or 4 weeks. I got depressed. I was sitting around at home, couldn't run. I really, I was just kind of going through that withdrawal. And it was affecting me physically and mentally. And I bumped into Kerry. And he goes, hey, Mike, what's up? He hadn't seen me running. We hadn't got together for runs.
Yeah.
And I kind of shared my story because he's a good friend. I said, I can't, my knee's so bad, I just can't run anymore. And I'm just sitting around getting fat. And I, kind of was hating life. And he didn't take a moment to say, get a bike. And like I always said, he didn't suggest it. He told me, he said, you get a bike. And he goes, we'll start riding. And it wasn't like, I'll think about it. It was like, okay. I found
tell us about that first bike.
It was $100 used Schwinn Caliente. It had a kickstand, but it had the trap, the pedals. You could wear running shoes and stick your foot in there and pull the strap tight so you were locked onto the bike.
Right.
And then it had the down tube shifters, which a lot of people don't know, but they're ancient. You don't see any bikes with down tube shifters. But I thought this is a pretty nice bike. It's a Schwinn. And so I started riding it around the neighborhood there. And I think I went 10, 15 miles. And I was riding in running shorts. I didn't have biking shorts or anything.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, Beards, I tell you, that's a delicate area when you're sitting on a bicycle seat. And especially with biking shorts, it helps a lot, but with running shorts, it's not the way to go. And
because biking shorts are kind of padded, right?
Padded, yeah. And the pad helps a little bit with the cushioning, but it really helps keep that area dry. It's kind of like wearing a diaper to keep the moisture from chafing and things like that. Anyway, and so I remember the longest ride I got up to. I did a 50-mile ride, and I rode down to a little town south of Dickinson called New England. And if anybody's familiar with North Dakota, they may have heard of New England, North Dakota. It's 25 miles straight south of Dickinson. So I rode down there one day, 25 miles. And I remember, man, I got psyched up to do this. I had pancakes the night before for supper. I carbo loaded because I'm thinking, because I set myself a challenge to try to ride 50 miles. And I rode the 25 miles down there, and there was a co-op gas station. I don't know if they even have co-op gas stations. And I had a couple bottles of water, and I drank them. I needed some more water. So I went into this co-op gas station, and there were about 6 or 7 old farmers sitting there playing pinochle. That's what they do. And I walked in with my helmet on, these running shorts, and I probably looked like I fell off the freaking out of the moon or something like that. And I go, hey, can I get some water? And the guy goes, yeah, there's in the bathroom. And so I had to try to tip my bottle in the sink in the bathroom, which it just looked nasty. I got some water. As I walked out, I said, well, thanks a lot. I wish I was a fly on the wall to hear what those guys said when I left. Probably about free. Well, I got back on the bike, rode the 25 miles back, and I made it. And I don't know if I need to get into the details to it, but when you don't wear the proper clothing and your pressure on certain parts of your body, especially in that area, nerves get compressed. And I'm not going to go any farther. I'll let your imagination. But anyway, shortly thereafter, I started riding more with Carrie and a guy named Craig Poole. And there was another guy, Kurt, and I can't think of Kurt's last name, but he was a good rider. And they kind of brought me on and started teaching me the ins and outs of cycling, like running, ain't a lot of things to learn.
No.
Good shoes, right. How to train properly, not to overdo it, but with cycling, drinking properly, having the right equipment, all that, and drafting, you learn about following behind another cyclist. The air is
because that does make a huge difference, doesn't it?
Great amounts. There's only 2 things cycling you have to overcome: gravity, going up a hill, or air resistance. And so once gravity, you want to stay skinny and light so you don't have to carry extra weight. And so I was running, I was still pretty fit, so I didn't have that as a problem. But you had to learn to ride down in what they call the drops. And there's all these little nuances of cycling that if you don't have somebody to kind of mentor you, and, I feel bad for new riders that show up at a group ride. And some of these bikers can be very judgmental. I thought runners were kind of weird. Cyclists are I think weirder because their egos, they get pretty into themselves and their equipment, and they kind of look at other people and start judging what you're doing. My buddies didn't do that to me, and I really appreciated that. They made me feel welcomed, and that really helped encourage me then to start riding more. And I figured out pretty quickly I had to get a better bike, and I did. And 25 bikes later and tens of thousands of dollars later, I finally really got going with it. But it took about 4 or 5 years to really get what I would call comfortable, knowledgeable, like I felt like I was part of the cycling group. And
you bet.
And again, you have to remember, I was only cycling about 6-7 months out of the year, because in North Dakota, the winters are like South Dakota and Minnesota. And I started buying indoor trainers to do it in the wintertime, just to, for fitness and to keep.
Oh, I remember talking to you many times. Yeah, I'm on my trainer down the basement. It's 30 below outside. Exactly.
And so you really have to have that fire in the belly. You got to be dedicated and motivated to. It's like the treadmill for runners, and I heard they call that the dreadmill in some places. Yes. It says runners just hate it, but what are you going to do if that's your only real, safe option? And so I did it for many, many years. And so, I started racing, and I enjoyed that because it kind of reminded me of running. Racing on bikes, you actually have more of a team concept. And I think people who watch the Tour de France understand that now, how you have teammates who kind of sacrifice themselves for their leader, like Lance Armstrong. Right. He didn't lead the first half of any of those races he won. He had teammates that would break the wind for him, bring him water, bring him food. They kind of, if somebody attacked, they would go and do the tactical, sacrifice their efforts to keep it under control. And so you kind of learn this, and that was fun. That was kind of fun to have a team aspect. And so cycling went on from 91 till about 2006, 2007. And I hit 50 years old, Beards. And, when you hit that big 5-0, I always say, we're not going to live forever. I know that.
No.
But you don't really think about your mortality. I think 50 I didn't have a midlife crisis at 40 or something. Mine was kind of 50, where you kind of hear. I woke up one day and thought, I'm kind of closer to the end than I am at the beginning. Because, making it to 100 is a great goal. I think that's, you should have goals.
You bet.
I've had people say, be careful what you wish for. You might make 100, not know it, because your dementia or Alzheimer's, something like that could kick in, and that's sad. But anyway, and so I was enjoying riding so much. And then I heard about this event called the Gut Check. And I was in South Dakota by this time, and it's a bike race they had across the state of South Dakota. You go, okay,
that's right. I forgot about this.
Yes, it's Highway 212. And if anybody wants to get a map of South Dakota, you'll see this right in the middle of the state, starting on the Wyoming border, and almost a straight line across the middle of South Dakota. There's a few little dips and doodles in it. You cross the Missouri River, and then you go all the way right to the Minnesota border. And it's one highway. It's Highway 212, and it's 412
I know exactly
miles.
Where it is.
Well, a young kid in Rapid City, who I can't remember his name now, but his dad or something suffered from celiac disease and some gastrointestinal disorders. And he put on an event to raise money, and he called it the Gut Check. And it kind of had a double meaning. The Gut Check was to raise money for gastrointestinal diseases. Right. And he was trying to help, promote, raise money for research and what have you. But it's also, if you're going to ride a bike 412 miles, you're going to have to do a, quote, gut check, because there's going to be some place during that ride you're going to say, I'm not sure I want to do this anymore. And so it was really a huge challenge. And I was, I think I've always had that. And I think you did too. It's kind of like, I want to see what I can do. Yeah, it's a challenge.
Absolutely.
And they're really, what, you're trying to prove something to somebody? No, I'm trying to prove it to me. I'm the only person you have to satisfy. Right. And if you're not feeling like, and so I wanted to take it on, but I had never run. I think the longest ride I'd ever done was like about 100 miles, 110 maybe. And this is 400 miles. And I thought, man, that's biting off. I'm not.
So, Don, you go from the Minnesota border to the Wyoming border and then back?
No, Wyoming to Minnesota, one way.
Okay.
One way. And you pray for a west wind. You pray for a west wind.
Yes.
So the first year they said, we also have a relay division. You can do it with 2 guys or 4 guys, and so they said, well, that you get more runners or cyclists if you do relays, and a lot of marathons will do that too. They'll say, look, if you can't run 26 miles, we're going to have a marathon relay. Get 5 runners. Each guy does 5. Last guy does a 10K, and that invites more people to participate. They raise more money for charities and what have you. So I talked to a friend of mine named Phil Tao, and Phil was a retired Air Force pilot. And I don't know if you know anything about Marines and pilots. These guys love a challenge. And Phil was he was a bike advocate. In fact, he worked at a bike shop. And I said, Phil, and he and I trained together. And I said, how about you and I do the gut check? I'll do the first half. No, he did the first half, 200 some miles. I'll do the second 200 miles. He said, yeah, that sounds like fun. Let's do it. And so he headed out to Rapid City. And long story short, I had to meet him then in Gettysburg, just past the Missouri River. And so he was going to do the first 200 plus miles, 210 or whatever it was. Then I do the last 200 and we see how we do, And so that seemed a little more reasonable. Well, he no sooner got 50, 60 miles into this event, and they had a thunderstorm, like, how they get in West River out in the plain.
Yeah.
He was sitting in a car, shaking, frozen and wet because this thunderstorm, lightning striking all over. And he had his crew guy with him, his support per vehicle that was there. You had to bring your own support. And they sat in his car like all honking night, waiting for daylight and the rain to stop. I'm in Gettysburg, and this is like before cell service. This is 2006, if I'm not mistaken. And he finally got a call to me and saying, look, I was expecting him like that morning. He got there at 4 p.m.
Oh my.
Karen, my support, we spent the day in Gettysburg. And if you ever spent a day in Gettysburg, you don't need a day to spend in Gettysburg. There's not a lot there.
Maybe a half an
hour. There you go. Well, finally he showed up, and I met him at the border, the city limit sign, because that was like, it had anywhere in the city limits you could change rider, take off. I met him right at the edge of town, and he looked at me and he was hammered. Because the wind was a east-northeaster, and we were heading straight east. And he had fought that headwind, and I looked at him, I go, any words of advice? And he goes, pace yourself. That's all he said. He just because he was dead meat. Well, I took off into this headwind, and I put it, I don't know if anybody knows, you have a big chain ring and a small chain ring. The small chain ring is when you go up hills because it makes less speed but more power. Sure. Well, I'm going into this headwind. I'm in the small chain ring. It's that strong of a headwind.
Wow.
Long story short, I rode 215 miles because we had some road construction. We had to in the small chain ring. It took me 13 hours and 27 minutes. I remember this
So you're in the wind the whole way.
I took 30 minutes of off the bike time. Every couple 4 or 5 hours, you want to try to eat something and it's hard to eat.
Sure.
So I'd pull over there and Karen had sandwiches and Gatorade. I'd refill my bottles and maybe I'd sit in the car for 5-10 minutes, kind of okay. And you'd get back in the car and head into the wind. And I remember I averaged like 16 miles an hour. My heart rate was
That's
140.
darn good.
But I tell you, it was pacing. And then we hit Watertown. It was dark. It was about midnight. And Beards, the temperature dropped. I was freezing. I didn't have the right clothing. And we finally got to the border. And, I was so hammered and never so happy in my life. I don't know, maybe you relate to that, where you've done something that took you to the edge of your abilities.
Yes.
And you made it. And the feeling of satisfaction, it's if you could bottle it and sell it. I was toast and I felt good about it. I couldn't wait to come back the next year. And I did it the whole solo, 412 miles in like 22 hours. And had a great ride. Everything went well. We never slept. It's a race. And so I went through it the whole way. And I thought, this is so cool. And I started thinking about this race across America. It's this ultra cycling events, because I was doing these 400-mile events now and actually enjoying it and love the satisfaction and the feeling I got of doing it. And so I went back in 2008 and did the gut check again. And this time it was getting popular. People were hearing about it. And a kid from Minneapolis named Bruce Martin showed up. And I didn't know Bruce Martin from anybody, but he looked like a bodybuilder. This guy was fit. He was about 30 years old. I'm like 51, 52 now.
Yeah.
You kind of chit chat guys at the starting line, and he took off like a bullet. And I got in right behind him, and I'm drafting him. And we're
flying. Oh, you did?
Oh man. From the border of Wyoming to Belle Fourche is about 15 miles. And we got to Belle Fourche, and I said, Bruce, I'm going to back off, because I kind of like to have somebody to ride with, just, socially, and it makes the time go by faster. But he was riding at such a pace. I thought, man, I got 400 miles to go yet.
Exactly.
I let him go, and I thought, well, I'll probably, see him later, and never saw him again. We ended up riding that thing in 19 hours. He did 19 hours, and I got to get this right, like 25 minutes, and I did like 19 hours and 40 minutes. He beat me by like 15 minutes.
But the whole way across?
The whole way across South Dakota. And the weather was perfect. We didn't really have headwinds. Maybe it wasn't real tailwind, but perfect conditions. And he beat me in fair and square. And I rode 21 miles an hour average for 412 miles.
Dang.
Yeah, I was kind of bummed I didn't win, but I felt so good about my effort. It's kind of like Beards.
You could have been his dad. I mean, come on now.
His dad. Dad, thank you for selling that. It makes me feel better. Well, that really turned me on. And so I know we'd always have the Dick Beardsley Marathon Camp, and Rich Benyo was such I just think Rich is such a great guy, and Rhonda Provost, his wife. Those two are ultra marathoners extraordinaire. I mean, the Badwaters, he did the double, first guys to ever do it. She was the first woman, and they inspired me, to say, look, I'm not getting any younger. If you ever really want to throw that challenge, it's like if you're going to climb Mount Everest, you better do it while you have the physical ability.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Maybe the financial ability, whatever. And so this race across America caught my eye, and I thought I'm gonna go for it. And I had to qualify. And so
tell us, Mikey, what the Race of America is.
It's 3,000 miles across the United States. You start in California, and I can't think for the life of me right now the name of the town we started. It's
by San Diego, I think.
Yeah, it's just north of San Diego. And the first thing you do is you ride across the Mojave Desert the first couple days. And it's like, I don't know if anybody knows about the Mojave Desert, but the average temperature is like 120 out there. And it's in June.
Gosh.
It's coming up here in a few weeks. And so to get into the race, though, you have it's 3,000 miles, and they give you 12 days, their time limit. And they have.
And you finish in like Maryland or something?
Yeah, out on the East Coast. And it's it's a map. You have to follow the course. There's 52 time stations. You have to check in. And if you got there faster than it's physically possible to ride a bike, they will figure that out, because you might have jumped in a car and ridden it. Yeah. So there's no cheating or anything. You can't draft. And it's quite an undertaking. It's a huge undertaking. And they put riders in who have qualified. They just say, you can't just show up and say, hey, here's my money. I'm going to do this. And so to qualify, you have to do a qualifying race. And the typical way to do it is to do a 24-hour race. And there's certain races that are certified, that are legitimate. And you have to go a minimum of 400 miles. in 24
24
hours.
hours.
And I had done the gut check across South Dakota in less than 24 hours. And so I thought, okay. So I went down to Port Byron, Illinois. And guess who went with me? My wife, Karen, and my best friend, Dick Beardsley. So that was
I'll
my
never
support
forget
crew. So the three of us headed to Port Byron, Illinois for this 24-hour thing. And 6 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, we got a hotel. We got there the night before, got up, got everything ready. And there was about 30, 40 riders. We took off and Karen and Dick are in the car and I'm riding my bike. And we had to do a couple 70-mile loops and then a whole bunch of 20-mile loops. Well, long story short, I got lost because everybody gets so separated from each other. And Karen and Dick said, well, what we'll do is we'll drive up ahead and we'll kind of, watch for you and make sure you know which way you go. Well, I got to a corner and they knew which way to go. They went the right way and this kept going. Well, I didn't. There were multiple markings on the road.
Yes.
And plus after riding it,
plus it's dark.
And I was a little out of it because you get a little hypoglycemia going on. I missed the corner.
Yeah, you were.
And I finally got, after about 4 or 5 miles, I thought, this doesn't seem right. And I got my cell phone. I had a cell phone at that time. And I called and they go, hey, what's up? Where are you? And I go, where are you guys? And they go, well, we're just on the way.
You were not happy. Let me tell you.
Where? And I didn't know where I was. And I didn't know where they were. And they were on the course. And I said, well, I'm not sure where I'm at. And they said, well, they didn't know where to come find me. Long story longer. Yeah, I probably said some things to Karen and Dick that I had to apologize for later because I wanted them to be at every corner. And I'm not blaming anybody here because it was my own mistake. I ended up riding about 12 miles extra to get back onto the course. Well, when I finally caught up with them, Dick, what did I say to you guys as I came up to you? I didn't say a freaking word. No. I remember I rode by you guys looking straight ahead like, and I remember you guys, I think you tried not to laugh because you were like, man, he's pissed.
I turned to Karen. I thought, he is not a happy camper.
Yeah, I didn't wave at him. I didn't smile. I didn't give him the thumbs up. All the things I normally would have done.
Well, at least you didn't flip us a bird or anything like that.
Finally, I finally kept riding. And one of the things I'd learned in the gut check was to drink chocolate milk. It seemed like that always worked for me as take a break, have some, because chocolate milk, I don't know what's in it. It's sugar mostly. It's great. And it just tastes good. And the chocolate's probably got some caffeine. Well, I started guzzling a couple bottles of this. I don't know what it was, some kind of chocolate milk stuff. And it sat in my gut and started to ferment.
Oh, I remember.
Oh, and I had the worst gut ache, and I could barely pedal a bike. I felt so miserable. I remember we pulled over, and there's cornfields, and I had to go relieve myself. And Dick was a dairy farmer, and I went into the cornfield, and let's just say it sounded like a heifer in there that had eaten way too much alfalfa and was bloated. And I remember listening to Dick and Karen were laughing because they could hear me in the cornfield, relieving myself of a lot of intestinal discomfort.
Let me tell you, though, that little patch of corn grew 15 feet tall.
Well, I got out of there and I felt great. And it's kind of, is kind of if you want to, during marathons, during races of any distance, you're going to have bad patches. And you're going to have good patches. I don't know, Dick, if you found that to be the case. Even in a 10K. I mean, I was in a few 10Ks where at 2 miles, I'm thinking, man, I'm not sure I'm going to make this thing. And then maybe by 3 or 4 miles, you're like, hey, wait a minute. I've got my stride and my breathing is settled down. And things. When a marathon, I think you can have in a
bunch of them.
Oh, in a 24-hour event, you can have lots of ups and downs. And I had a big down and I kind of rebounded and I had a great up. Well, and then the heat of the day came and I started cramping up and I started to get muscle cramps so bad I had to get off the bike and stretch. And I thought, well, there's no way I'm going to be able to do 400 miles if I keep stopping like this all the time.
Right.
And I was guzzling Gatorade and I just tried to get on the bike and pedal easy, blah, blah, blah. And again, I finally got back to where Karen and Dick were because then we were on these shorter 20-mile loops. And they were always so encouraging. And it was so nice every 20 miles to see a friendly face.
Yeah.
And you could get some fresh water, whatever. And I started. And then the evening came. And as the temperatures dropped, I got my mojo back. Because I think it was like overheated. And man, I started hammering. And I'm just going to be honest with you. I ended up doing like 410 miles, 422
that was so
miles.
Unbelievable.
If you count the 12 miles I got lost.
I know.
And when I crossed the finish line, and I'm not going to, I was sobbing like a baby. And I think Dick, you might even teared up a little bit.
Oh, I did.
I tell you, to have such a goal And to take such an undertaking on of a 24-hour race, a foot race, a running, a bicycling, any kind of challenge that's really a difficult challenge, and to, I don't want to say conquer it, but to finish it the way you wanted to,
Absolutely.
is so satisfying. And
And so that qualified you for
it
RAAM then,
qualified
right?
me for RAAM. Yeah. And so I had a year to get ready, because you have to do it within like 18 months after you qualify. And so the planning went into place. We had a heck of a crew. Rich Benio and his wife helped us.
Well, Don, let me just interrupt here for a second, because it's not just about getting on the bike out in California and going to the East Coast. The planning that you, Karen, and all bunch of people went into just getting started was unbelievable.
It's if anybody is curious, just Google RAAM and read about it. Yeah, you have to have. We had 2 vans and an RV, and it took a ton of fundraising. To do RAAM to cost about $20,000. I was so fortunate that my employer, Sanford Health in Sioux Falls, they paid my entry fee. They were so supportive of me doing something like this. And the entry fee at that time was $2,500. And a guy named Mike Bigeman. Mike was an outstanding basketball player at Parker, South Dakota. He was then in part of the sports development, helping the hospital do a lot of outreach. And he was instrumental in helping me to get this sponsorship from my employer. And so that took a huge financial burden. I didn't have the money just to write a check for 20 grand. And then we decided to say, look, let's do some fundraising. And we did 2 things. I started raising money for Sanford Cardiovascular Services, because I worked in cardiac rehab there, and the Dick Beardsley Foundation, because I really had a passion and a real strong belief for what Dick was doing at that time with this foundation, and getting out and speaking to young people and being a motivator and an educator.
Yeah.
And so we ended up raising about $30,000, if I remember right.
Wow.
And half of that went to the 2 charities, I guess. And then I used a big chunk of it. And then I kicked in a bunch of my own money to make it a reality in order to afford all this stuff. And, and I kind of made the commitment, and I have to give my wife, Karen, credit, because it's got to be a team effort. Yeah, we spent a ton of money, but it was like, this is something you're only getting one shot at maybe in my life. And I'm at an age where it's still a physical possibility. And so I said, and it was kind of one of those things you'll never know unless
how old were you at that time? I can't remember.
In 2010, I would have been 53 years old.
Yeah, okay. 53. Yeah.
And so we went out there and we gave it a shot, and you look back and, we do this a lot with races. You look back and reevaluate and do a review, and you go, well, if I could do it again. And yeah, I got into trouble out in the desert. I think the biggest mistake I meant 300 miles before I stopped took a sleep break in Parker, Arizona. We just crossed out of California. And I got there at about 8 a.m. and I slept for 3 hours, and I got up and I took off riding at noon. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever been to Parker, Arizona at noon in June. Hot. Man, I took off and rode about 50 miles to some place called Hope. And it says you are beyond hope when you leave town. And Dick was there. I cramped up both hamstrings. I could barely get off the bike, and it tore me up.
I felt so bad for what was happening to you.
I felt bad for me too. It hurt so bad. Well, you can only stay off the bike for so long. And so then you climb on the bike. I got to Congress. I climbed this thing called the Yarnell Grade. It's 8 miles at about 8% climb up this mountain. I tell you, it was tough. And we got into Utah, the Monument Valley. It's a beautiful area. We went through Mexican Hat, which has these stone, I don't know what you'd call them, these rock formations that look like a Mexican Hat. And I got out in the middle of nowhere, a place called Montezuma Creek. And it was barren desert. And I was at about 750 miles, and we called it. I had to pull the plug. And it was very disheartening. I'm a kind of goal-oriented person, and to not, the satisfaction you get from achieving a goal, the disappointment you get when you don't achieve a goal is pretty severe as well. But, you kind of have to look at it realistically. Did you do everything? Did you train properly? Did you prepare properly? Did you do, you try to control all the variables you can control. And then some things, I wish I could put my thumb on what was it. I think training in South Dakota in the dead of winter for an event that summer in the heat of the desert.
No, that didn't help. But but Dunn, I remember. Listen, it was unbelievably tough on Dunn, but I'm in his crew, and I am just absolutely spent, and I'm just riding in a car.
Yeah,
I
because you
mean,
guys don't get
and then
much rest.
oh no, you don't get much sleep. But Dunn, I remember how you got like bloated.
I
Now,
did.
what was that from? Too
Well,
much liquid or what?
yeah, you try to make sure you're drinking enough. I was drinking too much Gatorade, which has a ton of sodium in it, which is
Yep.
good. But there's a happy. You can have too much of a good thing, and there's a condition called third spacing. And third spacing is when your body kind of has a self protective mechanism. If your blood's volume's getting out of sync, it'll take fluid, plasma, and shift it into these extracellular space. It's called, and you start swelling up. You get edema in your abdomen, in your legs, and that's why a lot of people wear
Oh,
hoses when they're traveling.
right.
Like support hoses to keep the swelling, the fluid from gathering in areas. And so that complicated things as well. And so we ended up not finishing, and learned a ton. I have no regrets that I would have
No.
regretted not trying it, and always wondering if I
Done.
could have done it. But
Okay, that's
yeah,
what you just said there. You know what? You're never a failure. The only time you're a failure at something is when you get to the point where you look back and say, I wish I would have at least tried. You know
yeah,
what? You gave it your best shot.
yeah,
You
yeah.
trained hard for it. You had a great support system. And
Didn't work
you
out.
look back with no regrets. Like
No.
if you wouldn't have done that, you would have
Oh,
looked back now at our age and
oh,
thought, gosh dang it, I wish I would have given it a
I would have.
shot.
Well, as you know, then I came back home, and I was kind of it's very discouraging because so many people were
Yeah.
following it and knew, and so there was the gut check was happening again that August, and this what I did RAAM in June, so I'd recovered. It was about 7-8 weeks later, and I thought, well, I'm going to do the gut check, and they had a new event called the Hell and Back. And the Hell and Back is what
Oh,
you described there, Dick. You start at the Minnesota border, ride to the Wyoming border, turn around and ride back. It's 824
oh.
miles. And I thought, hey, that sounds like I'm going to do it. Because
Guess you
I'd
didn't learn
learned,
your lesson.
I'd learned a lot at RAAM, and I thought I'm going to take it. And so Karen, my
Yes.
son and his best friend, they followed me all the way out there. And there was another rider named Jason Harms. And Jason and I started together, and I rode a little faster pace than he wanted to go. And so I took off. So I was all by myself, and I rode all the way across the state of South Dakota to the Wyoming border. And when we got to the to Belle Fourche, I was going to take a short sleep break, like 3 hours,
Yeah.
and then get back going. Well, a storm rolled through again. Those goddamn storms. I mean, we're talking. This looked nasty, and
Yeah.
there was no bicycling in this storm. And I went back to the hotel and slept till midnight. I got about a 7-hour sleep break, which is really
Nice.
nice. Yeah. So we took off at midnight. Now Karen had driven that day all the way across the state to get to Fourche that afternoon. That way, then Ben and his friend could stay and rest. Then she at
Yeah.
midnight, so she really didn't get any sleep that day or that night because then we
Oh
started heading
my.
back east all the next day and into the night. And I got back to the 824 miles. It took me, the total time was 65 hours, but about 8 of those hours were off the bike. So yeah,
Right.
anyway, so I did get a nice sleep break in the middle. Karen basically got no sleep. And
Oh my.
at Beards, the last 20 miles, I'm at 800 and like miles, and I've only got 24
Yeah.
miles to go. And Karen's behind me, and it's 3 a.m. And and we have radio communication. We had walkie talkies. And she
Yeah.
goes, I can't stay awake. I'm afraid I'm going to run
Oh
over you
no.
because she's in the car behind me with headlights.
Oh,
And I go, look, we're almost done. And she goes,
right.
and then she said, I have to go to the bathroom. And I go, well, we'll be done in like an hour. She goes, I really got to go. I really got to go. And so we finally, I pulled over and stopped so she could jump out of the van. She was by herself and jump in the
Yeah.
ditch, do what she had to do, get back in the car. And she's like, I'm afraid I'm going to fall asleep. And I go, look, I'm out here. Not that I got mad at her, but we got to the finish, and it was another one of those. And I have some photos. I'll put them up on our site, or I'll put them out there.
Yeah.
And
Please do.
when I got done at 824 miles, I've got the biggest smile on my face. And after my disappointment of RAAM, here we are 2 months later doing Hell and Back.
Yeah.
And I always say I kind of got my mojo back. You kind of isn't it funny how you're as good as your last race?
Absolutely.
If you have a bad race, you kind of feel bad about I hate to say yourself, but you're disappointed. Then you know what the best thing to do? Go find another race. And I did.
Yes, it is.
So long story short, we came back in 2011, And I went back out to California and I did what's called the Race Across the West.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
part of the Race
That's
Across
right.
America, but you don't have to go all the way across the U.S. You go to Durango, Colorado, 860 miles. And I thought, I bit off more than I could chew last time. I'm going to see how this one goes. And we did it. We did it in about 80 hours. And it was a real, again, learning experience. But I also had that bloating that I gained 20 pounds of fluid in those 860.
That is just crazy.
It is. See, I rode the first 437 miles to Prescott, Arizona from the coast of California. 437 miles before I took my first sleep break. I hadn't slept for about 36 hours, I think it was.
Oh, my.
And so I slept for 3 hours, and then I got back on the bike and started riding again. And again, my body, you're kind of going, well, what do you expect your body to do? It had a tough time with it, and I think, my physiology, the way my body, my processing fluids and food and stuff, it really had to struggle with it. And I got through that, but I tell you what, I got done. I was 20 pounds heavier. I weighed 160 pounds at the beginning of that ride. I weighed 180 pounds. I had gained 20 pounds of fluid.
From water weight.
From water weight. And so I actually was having a little trouble breathing because my abdomen was I looked like I was in my third trimester.
Gosh.
I couldn't bend over. And so I went to the ER. Because whenever you can't breathe, my wife, they all got nervous.
Yeah.
And they said, you're short of breath. You better go check it out. And the ER doctor at Durango, he goes, he said, you're one of those riders because the race goes through Durango every year. And I go, yeah. And he goes, we get you guys in here every year. And he took a chest x-ray and he goes, yeah, you got a little bit of fluid in your lower lobes or whatever. And he goes, it should correct itself. He goes, when are you going home? I said, tomorrow. We're flying home. And he goes, if this isn't better within 24 hours, call your primary care doctor.
Okay.
And Dick, I got home I was miserable on that flight the next morning.
I bet.
I got on the plane. I felt like crap. And we got home that afternoon. It was just good to be home. I went to bed that night and Beards, every hour to 2 hours, I would like pop up out of bed because I was about ready to burst a bladder.
I bet.
And I'd go into the bathroom, and this sounds terrible for people listening, but I think I had to flush and I was still going because I was afraid I was going to overflow the darn thing. I probably went to the bathroom 6 times that night. And every time I woke up to have to go, it was like, yes, I do. And I felt so good about it. And I went in there and I, after about 24 hours, I pretty much lost that 20 pounds of fluid.
That's crazy.
Well, I called my primary care doctor and told him about this. And he goes, okay. He said, if that doesn't stop, call me. Like if you get below 160, because now it's like your kidneys have compensated. Now maybe you'll get dehydration and stuff. And I got back to 160 and things leveled off and life was good again.
So Don, I got to ask you. Yeah. Wait, let me ask you something. So when you got a few of those short little sleep breaks, 3-4 hours, was it mentally and physically tough to think, I got to get on that gosh dang bike again?
Nah, and Beards, that's a good question. I would lay down and be so tired that I would just almost like, I would fall asleep. And I'd done some research. You have what they call sleep cycles, and they're like 45 minutes. So if you're going to take a nap, and, there's power naps like 10, 15 minutes. That's a different story. But if you're going to sleep at least 45 minutes or an hour and a half, or, in these 45-minute chunks. So that's why we came up with 3 hours. But that 3 hours in my sleep was a blink of an eye. I mean, it was like I fell asleep, and the next thing it was somebody waking me up going, Mike, it's time to get up. And you want to go, I just fell asleep. What do you mean it's time to get up? And they go, it's been 3 hours. Well, because I knew about the time limits, I would pop up because it's like, oh shit, I got to get going. I don't want to waste time. You can't waste time sleeping. And so, it's really I just ran into a young rider in New Bern. I was back last week, and he said his goal is to do this RAAM event in about 2 years from now. He's 29.
Yeah.
And he's a good rider and very strong. And he's already putting in some pretty strong rides, and he's kind of getting prepared to make this effort. And I said, well, I did it. He goes, yeah, I heard that. And I go, can I give you some advice? And he goes, oh, I'd love to have some advice. And I said, don't do it. And he goes, oh, no, I want to do it. And I go, well, okay. I said, if you know what you're getting into, and I said, it's really, 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 it's a huge take. And I go, people do it, but about half the people attempt it never finish it. Less than 300 people have finished the Race Across America in like 40 years.
That's crazy.
And more people have climbed Mount Everest. But of course, Mount Everest is kind of a weird thing. One guy did Mount Everest and RAAM. He was a famous rider, and he's an adventurer. And he said Mount Everest was more dangerous to do than RAAM.
Right.
But RAAM was harder than climbing Mount Everest.
Wow.
And so, he had both those perspectives. So I told this kid, I said, do it.
Go ahead.
If you've got this in your gut, and that's kind of a message I like to tell people, is just say yes. When something in your heart, maybe it's talking to somebody that you're afraid to talk to. If you're a young kid in high school and you look up to some seniors or something like that, don't be afraid to go up to them and say, God, you guys what advice would you give me as far as training, or something? Or if there's a kid who's not getting much attention and you kind of feel bad for the kid and you go, I wish somebody would go talk to that kid, and just maybe befriend him a little bit. And in your heart, you should do it. You know what I'm going to tell you? Just do it. Or if somebody says, I want to do I'd like to run a marathon someday. I think that's a great goal. Learn all you can about how to do it, set a course, plan it out, and you'll never have a greater feeling of satisfaction than when you reach a goal that you've set. And it's a goal that's not, it's attainable, but it's not going to be easy. And so I think those are the kind of things people should look for. Well, and ever since Beards, I just love riding. I've kind of given up that ultra cycling stuff. Well, I'm 67 years old now. And, Karen and I go out and we still occasionally, I did a 100-mile ride. A week ago. I went out with a bunch of my buddies and we did 100 miles, and 100 miler is kind of like a marathon, for a bike. Right. It's you stop a couple times, have some food and stuff. I tell you what, though, if you have a passion and it's something that gives you that feeling of satisfaction, there's nothing greater in the world. And it's better than, what's that? I could be gambling. I guess I could do some other things that are probably not as healthy.
Well, and Don, even though you didn't, you had to drop out of the RAAM, I was so proud of you just for the fact of the effort you put into it and going after this unbelievable quest. And, you listen, you've been an inspiration to me since the day we met back in August of 1978.
Well, it goes both ways. And I think that's, we're kind of kindred spirits that way, that we both have I like to think a pretty good outlook on life and being with other people. I think relationships, it's the little things. Money's great, but so many people put the focus. I'm not saying, money's great to have, but some people, they make it their obsession. And at the sacrifice of a lot of maybe personal relationships or personal aspirations. I feel bad for the kid and the guy, this 29-year-old. 29, he's going to take on RAAM. It's a huge financial obligation. And I told him, hey, if you're going to do it, keep me on your list. Send me a note. I love to help you financially, because I like to see people that have a goal that's really a tough goal. And if I can help you try to attain that goal. I had a couple guys, a guy named Keith Miller, and Keith is just one of the greatest. He gave me $500 and out of his pocket to help me do RAAM, to support my efforts. And I kind of said, why would you be so generous? And he goes, I love to support people that have a great goal, and I want to see if they can do it. And he goes, if that's all it takes is money for you to get this, to see if you can do that goal, I'm happy to help you. So I hope anybody hears this will take it on as a challenge to find a passion and a goal that you've always wanted to do.
Yes.
Make a plan. And I always say with that, just say yes. Know what you're getting yourself in for. I mean, it's easy to say yes when you're out Friday night drinking beer with your buddies.
Right.
And then come Saturday when somebody calls you up and goes, you said you were going to do this. Let's get after it. And you go, what did I say last night? I'm not sure I really want to do that. But know what you're saying yes to and get after it. And Beards, you've always done that. Listen, so let's keep going.
Don, you're the best of the best. You're you and Karen are the I could not even, if I could wish for the best friends, it would be you two guys. And we've been great friends and
likewise,
supporters of each other for, getting close to 50 years now. And you're the best of the best. And we want to thank everybody for listening. And if you have any questions for Don or myself, comments about the show, you can contact us directly at our website at beardsanddunpod.com, or you can leave us a comment on our Facebook, Instagram, or X, all at Beards and Dun Pod. Don, this went by so quick, and thank you for sharing that incredible story about the RAAM.
Well, Beards, we've all got stories, and it's fun to share stories. And if anybody can gain a little motivation, inspiration, or education from it, hopefully a little. Some of those stories are kind of embarrassing, but I'm not ashamed of them anymore.
Me neither.
Sometimes fact is stranger than fiction and stuff. So, but Beards, thanks for have a great day, great weekend. And you know what I always tell you? Stay in the boat. And what about me? Stay on the bike.
Talk to you next week, buddy.
Thanks, bud. Have a good day.
You too.